creative side of coaching, especially when it comes to strength and conditioning. We're going to talk about support for this episode comes from Modern Football Technology. Modern Football Technology provides real-time opponent tendencies and self-scout while eliminating manual data entry into Huddle, DV Sport, and Exos. If you're tired of tools that are time-consuming to learn and perform inconsistently at best, then we recommend Modern Football for a fresh perspective. Schedule a demo today at teammofo.com to see a battle-tested tool that's proven to perform and deliver value. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year. And listen to our recent episode featuring Folsom High School defensive coordinator Jordan Ersick to learn more about how the 2023 California State Champion uses modern football to dominate their opponents. About how you crack into this profession and really make it and some of the things you need to do. And we're going to talk about how you keep your players excited throughout the offseason. And joining me to discuss all those things is the head football strength and conditioning coach at Georgia Tech, Lew Caralla. Lew, it's great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
So, Coach, we're going to dig right into it and get into your background here first and talk about your start in coaching, because I think in what you explained to me, your start was kind of formative in how you have approached this profession and the way you've gotten it done. So for you, being a Division III football player, you got this start and working for free in the summers. Talk to us about your start and really how that's helped, I guess, develop your mindset as a coach.
Yes, sir. Well, when I was still playing at Defiance College in Ohio, I had 2 years to play. So that first summer I was there, and I lived in Tampa growing up. So I went home for the summer, and I got an internship in South Florida. And that whole experience opened my eyes, and the coach actually let me train with one of the groups because he knew I was still playing. So I trained with the 9 a.m. group, and I trained the next 3 as a coach for the rest of the day. So I was extremely exhausted every day. But the coach at the end of the summer said, if you're not first team all conference, I'll never hire you. So I had to be first team all conference. There was no choice. But that experience opened my eyes to the whole possibility of strength and conditioning. I was addicted. I wanted to do it. I knew what I wanted to do now. So that was huge for my life. And then I went back as a junior and finished that season. And then following summer, again, I go home to Tampa for the summer, but I ended up moving to Virginia, to the University of Virginia, and just rented an apartment for 3 months and worked there for free with their football program. And that was the experience that kind of took my career and really put me on a fast track, because Matt Bayless, that guy I worked for, was, he taught me the passion, the not just it's not what you do, it's how you do it, that kind of thing. And I was completely driven after watching him work. But yeah, it all started as an undergrad, and that kind of set me up to be a GA as soon as I got done graduating.
In looking at what you did in those years, and I know there's some mentorship that's developed out of there too, but the mindset of making sacrifices, right? That's especially for a kid who's still in college. A lot of times those guys want to go home, hang with their buddies, get their work done in summer, but party a little bit, and you're off working, exhausting yourself all day, the second time moving away from home, and you're not getting paid a dime for it, for the sacrifice part of it. And I know that's something you, as a coach, you're going to go through a lot of changes over the course of your career. Most of you, if you aspire to climb to the highest levels. I guess talk to us a little bit about what that experience taught you about sacrifice in this profession.
Well, it just gave me great perspective on young coaches trying to crack into the field. I think everyone wants to just get hired as an assistant one day as soon as they're done playing. Well, there's a lot of people that are way ahead of you on the experience chain, but they're underneath that level. So I just always look at that experience as I would never be where I'm at today if I never made those relationships while I was working for free. And I didn't even know what was going to come from it. I knew being a head guy one day was a long-term goal of mine, but at the time, I'm not even close to that. I can't even think of that. So every day I just try to be first to work. I try to be last to leave. I tried to ask coach if he needed anything else every second I could. I tried to ask questions every chance I could. And I still got my journals from those free months that I worked. And that gives me great perspective now. And I can give great insight to the interns that come to my program and work for free in the summer. And I got a lot of respect for the people that move across the country to work for free, not knowing if it'll pay off or not. But that's the sacrifice you're willing to take. So that's what I did, and I'm thankful it worked out.
When you look at your development as a coach, and you have to, especially on the football side of things, because it's so heavily integrated into the football program, into the way the culture works with strength and conditioning, that you have to learn certainly the strength side, but also you have to have a strong understanding of how you're going to work with the football side, how you're going to help build culture, because you are one of three guys basically who touches the entire team. It's the head coach, it's the strength and conditioning coach, and the special teams coach actually work with all players. So you're heavily integrated into that. What were some of the key lessons you learned in how to develop both sides of that as you started through this profession?
Well, there's so much that goes into it. Like, how can you possibly understand what they're going through if you haven't played? That's kind of one thing I've always tried to hang my hat on is, I didn't play at this level, but I still went through those 2-day camps, and I still felt like my shins were going to break every time I walked on that field and got through it. Like I still had that internal experience where I know exactly what you're going through. And then on top of that, how do you inspire these guys in a weight room now and get them going? Like it's one thing if I'm just trying to show them how to work out, but it's another thing if I'm actually doing the work before they get there. And I've always done that. Football is one of the best games in the world, but I believe the work that goes into football is what makes you who you are. So that's kind of what I've always wanted to do. Once I realized, look, I want to be a football coach. I want to be involved, but man, being a strength coach for me is the dream, because I get to really see these kids' soul day in and day out and get them going.
With that comes kind of different approaches to this in the way that the head football coach integrates the strength coach in the strength program. And you see some situations where you could tell it's those guys are in lockstep, working together. It's all part of a bigger picture, and then some other guys, turn them over to you and let you do your thing. Have you experienced both of those? And I guess, your thoughts on what works best.
Yes, sir. I have experienced both sides where some coaches have drastically tried to give you every idea that they want done in that weight room, what kind of exercises they want, what kind of racks that they need to rotate on. I mean, you name it, like off-season meetings forever, just about their ideas that they want to get done. And then you might get some of your ideas in. It's not easy as a strength coach if your head football coach is dictating the whole thing. But on the other side, like the one I'm working for now and the previous coach I just worked for at Buff, like those two just let me go, and trusted my they gave me complete control of the program and never bothered me. They just trusted me. And I can't explain enough to the coaches out there how important that is, to have the trust in your strength coach. If you have it, it's a great situation, because I feel nobody's looking over my shoulder constantly. I can be myself. The players feel that, and they get better from it. So it's a great experience when your head football coach has complete buy-in on you, and I think your program can take off from that point.
And you mentioned to me that allows you to be creative in what you do, and the creativity part is a big part of it for you. It allows you to create better buy-in, enthusiasm, etc. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about that aspect of you as a coach who you have to accomplish certain objectives. At the end of the day, you have to get these guys ready to be what their position coaches, what the head coach, what the coordinators want them to be out on the football field. But there's multiple ways of getting there. And, that's where you've been able to excel a bit and kind of become known for some of the things that you do in the weight room. So talk to us about that creative side and what you're able to do with that, how you're able to help the team in a better way.
Yeah, so every Friday in our off-season program, doesn't matter if it's the winter or the summer, it's always a theme lift. We always call it something, or there's some kind of different purpose behind it, or you name it, we do it. And I would never give a player a workout I haven't done myself. So safety's number one. Nothing matters if they're not safe. So I make sure, because sometimes I get carried away writing, when I'm listening to my war music in my office and keep writing and keep doing things. But once I try it, I got to change a lot of things and then adapt it, and so they can do it, and it's fresh and it flows well. But I just think predictable is boring. I think if you have a solid program Monday through Thursday, and it's basic strength work, it's getting them better on certain lifts, it's progressing, great. But Friday, for me, that's the day where, look, we're all together. It doesn't matter if you're a lineman or a skill guy. We're doing the same thing, and this is going to make our team closer. Because what I've found is through the years of coaching, the one thing that players always talk about every time I call them are those memories on our Friday lifts. And to go into a little detail, we just, for example, sometimes we have a partner lift where it's you and two other guys, and you got to get to this amount of reps together to move on from that mountain you just climbed. So if we're trap bar deadlifting, we got to do X amount of reps together, and then we can move on to bench press, and then we can move on to pull-ups and so on. So that's one, just showing them that they need their teammate. Another one is just, the tap out lift where it's you versus someone else in like 14 different events, and who you're matched up with early on in the week. So you're just kind of feeling that anxiety, and it's kind of like a game. You got to figure out how to beat someone. So you show up to the weight room that Friday, and who your matchup is, and you've been thinking about it all week, and you got to figure out how to beat them in 14 different events, like getting on a treadmill at 2 miles an hour. Who's going to get out first? The only way you can win an event is if the guy you're going against quits. And it shows you a lot with guys and how they mentally check out if they can't win a couple things. Or I could go on and on about all these lifts, but it would probably take the full episode. So I really enjoy the Fridays, and I feel like a lot of coaches ask a ton of questions about those the most.
I know the other thing in listening to a clinic talk from Coach Collins, and we had it here on the podcast a week ago, he talked about what you do with the hunger board. And it's a way that you evaluate things. And I know Coach talks about looking for guys who are one of us, right? And a big part of your culture there. But the hunger board is part of that, and that's something you're in charge of. Talk to us about the hunger board, what it is, and how you go through and evaluate players.
So essentially it's an effort board. We call it the hunger board because there's 3 levels of hunger. There's satisfied, which is the worst kind of guy that thinks he's just doesn't need to do anything else to improve. There's hungry, which is basically average. You're hungry, but you're not going to do more than what's required of you. And then there's starving, the guys that you will go to war with any day of the week because they always bring it. They're consistent. They are the team leaders. You got to kick them out of the weight room on the weekends because they just can't get enough. So we vote every week. Doesn't matter what talent you have. It doesn't matter what position you are. It doesn't matter if you were an All-American. The walk-ons tend to dominate that board as well, which they love because they're the hardest workers most of the time. So it doesn't matter to us who you are. What matters is your effort, your consistency, your discipline, your accountability, your toughness, your grit. So we'll alphabetically go down the roster. The whole strength staff will give a vote. They'll give opinions on why, so-and-so. What do you guys think? Well, if there's kind of a hesitation or like he's not starving, It's normally unanimous when a guy's starving. So we hang our hat on that board in the weight room, and kids take full offense if they're not on starving, and they ask questions on how to make it there. And it's a very inspiring board to try to move up on, and it's kind of the driver of our strength program.
And I know, part of this comes from you being able to understand what each of these guys wants too, and getting to know them, right? Getting to know the person. And as a strength coach, you do something that a lot of position coaches do, that the head coach does, that you interview every player. What kinds of things are you looking for in those interviews, and how big are those interviews in helping you develop each individual in the program?
Oh, they're the biggest. They're the most important thing I do by far. It's the best when you complete the interview because you feel so much closer to the kid that you just met. He shares so much with you. Sometimes you ask the simplest questions and get the deepest answers. So I have about 25 questions I ask each kid, and normally if I can get this done in the first month or two, great, because the sooner the better. I've been a head guy 4 different spots, and 3 times I was the only new guy on staff. So I had to come in and set the tone, of course, but also tell them to not respect me yet, because I want to get to know you and earn your trust. So that interview is what that does. And you talk about questions like, what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome? Who in your life inspires you? What's your family situation at home? Who's the worst coach you've ever had and why? Who's the best coach you've ever had and why? What are your goals this season? What are some things that you could change about this? If you could change about this team, you would. Just so I can get a pulse on who this kid is, what he wants from this place, what he wants from me, what kind of coaches he doesn't like, so I know what's going to really bother him or not. And then also just, coaches are so quick to judge a kid by his body language when they don't know anything about the kid. They don't know what he's going through. They've never asked. They never will. They're just going to judge him and make an assumption and then chalk him up to be something. There's a lot of kids going through a lot of things. So if you don't know those, you'll never have the insight you need to really make a difference in his life. And I think a lot of coaches, they say they want to make a difference, but man, the effort it takes to actually make a difference in a kid's life is endless. So, I mean, that's the start of it, and then the journey continues forever.
I know as you're going through and you're looking at your hunger board, you certainly don't want to see those guys who you're classifying as not hungry, and if they're remaining there for a while, there's some things maybe that you need to dig into. How much do you get involved in those types of interventions with those players?
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of guys that just think doing extra work is enough to get them on the starving board. It's not. Look, everyone's going to do a little more than what's required of them. And the question always comes back, what do I got to do to get on starving? Well, it's different for everyone. So if you do extra work, but you're not that good in the lifts and you never stand out and you're not really affecting your teammates and you're not impacting the room. If you were not here, I wouldn't notice. That kind of thing always helps guys try to give more energy to the room, and, you'll see a natural difference. But then there's a lot of kids that don't ask, and then that tells you a lot too. But I'll go back to the interview where I'll see a kid tell me what he wanted to get done, and then I'll see him on the hungry side or the satisfied side, and I'll go up to him and say, hey, didn't you say you want to be a first-team All-American? Didn't you say you were doing this for your mom? So where is that? Where's that guy at? Well, that's what I'm still waiting for. And because it's personal and because he told you it, he's going to show more the next day.
When things change from off-season to in-season and the focus for those players now really shifts to what do I got to do to win on Saturday, how do you stay fully involved and integrated now as a strength coach when we hit that part of the season?
When I was a first-time head strength coach at North Texas, we were not good, and we went 1-11. But every week, being a first-time head guy, I took as a challenge because every Sunday we lifted. So how do I get the guys going, even though we just lost by 30, and we have a harder opponent next week? What kind of messaging and effort do I got to give to these kids for them to believe even more this week, even though the opponent's harder? So that situation made me realize that the strength coach has to be strong for his players in their weakest times. And that's how I look at it. I'm here to get them stronger. I'm here to keep them strong. I'm here to keep them healthy. Mobility and flexibility picks up a lot in season. The reps go down a little bit. The strength numbers that we're working with, they stay moderate. But as far as the messaging, that's probably the biggest difference. There's so many more kids in the in-season that are disappointed because they're either not playing, they feel like they've been lied to, they feel like they're not getting theirs because of the coach, blah, 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 blah. So that's where I have to come in and play psychology 101 on every kid that needs help. And they know they can always come to me like that. The office is always open. The phone's always on. I try to share everything I can personally with them, so they always feel comfortable opening up to me. And that's kind of where I'm at in season. I'm that guy that kind of keeps the fires out and makes sure the team is focused in the right direction and not thinking about the wrong things, and gearing up a theme every new week that it's a 1-0 mindset, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I would mention on in season.
With your messaging and the way you're able to really get this mindset right for them in multiple ways, whether that's the team or those guys who need it as individuals, what kind of places do you draw from for those messages, in keeping these guys together?
Great question. I draw a lot of my messages from playing, and I go back to how I thought as a player. I think if there's so many coaches that have so much great experience that they don't use, they got to remember what it was like thinking about all these things in your mind before you play a game, especially in front of how many people they're about to play in front of. But I just think, going through experiences and not using them is a big waste. And I share the mistakes I made as a player with my mindset. I was worried about this, or I was worried about that, and I should have been thinking about this and this and this. And then I would have given those stats I was thinking about, and so on. I could go multiple different routes, but as a player, the things I read, the mistakes I've made, the regrets I have, I come up with my own quotes. It's my biggest hobby probably. Different messages I write on the computer every day that hopefully one day turns into a book. But you name it. I mean, I listen to podcasts, everything I can draw from to help these kids.
We've talked a lot about the human side of this. In strength and conditioning, you're able to get numbers. You're able to get some of these metrics that certainly help you develop things. So when you look at that side of it and the technologies that you use, what pieces of technology really are the best for you, and things you're able to rely on to help you better craft the programming for these guys?
So technology is great, if you have the means to do it, but I honestly think some of the most impressive things are just tracking the basic things like your bench and your squat or your deadlift or your vertical jump or your broad jump, and watching those basic combine movements improve in an off season is a lot of fun. So, this off season we focused a lot on vertical jump and 225 rep max. So you're going to probably get what you emphasize. If I emphasize 30 things, I don't know if I'd get a lot out of those 30, but if you emphasize 2, you'll probably improve a lot in those 2. So vertical jumps went way up. 225 numbers went way up. And the cool thing about the vertical jump is the kids that gain weight and their vert goes up, they're moving with a lot more power now. So we have this power formula we use and present that to the coaches. Like, look, this kid gained 10 pounds. He lost body fat and his vert went up 3 inches. You're getting a new kid out there. You know, he's moving so much better. So that's been a lot of fun. The 225 rep max. I mean, some of these numbers are ridiculous of just from the start to the finish of just the effort that goes into that, though. It takes a lot, and you got to train hard. You know, there's no way around it. But that's kind of, sorry to not really answer your question on the technology thing, but I think you get what you emphasize, and we emphasize those things, and we saw a lot of improvement.
Coach, to finish things up and you know, looking at everything you do as a coach and all the things you've mentioned to us, some great things here, but what would be the one thing you would point to that really gives your guys the winning edge?
I would say, as a coach, if you want your players to buy in to your program, you need to buy into your vision. You need to buy into yourself. And I mean, you need to be the message you're trying to preach. Like, you have to, if you want the kids to be early, you need to be early. If you want them to stay late and do extra, you need to do that as well. If you want them to be tough, resilient, all these things, well, I hope you're living that way too. You know, if you're going to be that guy that says all this stuff and then goes plays around on the weekend and live up to nothing you just said, well, you're a hypocrite, you know, and they're going to sniff that out real quick. So I think with the players, with the winning edge, like you talk about, be the message you preach. And I believe that will translate to them being the message they're trying to preach, because player leadership is one of the hardest things to gain. And if you have it, it's probably very real, because those players gave up those weekend habits. They gave up that nightlife. They gave up that hypocrite. So if you're not that guy, they're not going to be. If you don't have fire in your heart, they won't. If I could keep going, but I think it's important to be the message you try to preach.
Coach, what's the best way for coaches to connect with you if they have any questions?
I have Twitter at Lew Caralla. I just started Instagram because the players told me to get it. So that's at Lew Caralla. And then my email, the email I always respond to is lewiscaralla@yahoo.com. So,
and we'll put those in our show notes as well, so coaches could get to them. Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time today and giving us some insight into the things you do at Georgia Tech, and best of luck to you and the Yellow Jackets in 2021.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for a rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coach and Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.